Have you ever noticed how much power you carry when you finally choose yourself? Not when you beg, not when you plead, not when you try to prove your worth, but when you stand tall, breathe deeply, and simply walk away. That's the moment the entire game shifts. That's the instant when the avoidant, the one who thought they held the control, the one who believed they could keep you dangling with mixed signals and cold silences, suddenly feels the ground crumble beneath their feet. Because here's the truth, the second you remove your energy, their world begins to collapse. Now, I want you to imagine this. You've been giving, loving, trying, waiting. You've been patient with their distance, their walls, their silence. You've tried to break through, tried to prove you're safe, tried to convince them you're not like everyone else, and still nothing. Still, they retreat. Still, they push you away. But then one day, something inside you changes. You no longer chase. You no longer beg. You no longer accept breadcrumbs. You realize your value doesn't depend on whether they choose you or not. And so, you walk. At first, they might pretend it doesn't matter. They might act as if they're relieved. They'll put on a mask, as though your absence is just another chapter in their carefully guarded life. But behind that mask, their world starts to shake. Because the one thing they never planned for, the one thing that terrifies them more than intimacy itself, is losing the one person who truly saw them, who truly cared, who truly held space for them. When you walk away, you ignite the collapse of their false sense of control. You tear down the illusion they built to keep themselves safe. And in that collapse, in that chaos, something powerful happens. They finally feel the weight of what you were to them. They finally see the space you once filled. They finally realize that you weren't just another person passing through. You were the anchor in their storm. And this isn't just about romance. This is about your life. This is about reclaiming your strength, your dignity, your power. Because walking away is not weakness. Walking away is not giving up. Walking away is the highest form of self-respect. It's the declaration, I will no longer bleed for someone who is afraid to hold me. I will no longer fight for someone who refuses to fight for me. When you walk away, their world collapses, but your world expands. And that is the moment where everything changes. So today we're going deep. We're going to unpack the 6 life-changing truths about what really happens when you take your power back and walk away from the avoidant. Get ready, because this is the shift that sets you free. The very first thing that happens when you walk away from the avoidant is this: the silence they once used as their weapon turns against them. For so long, silence has been their shield, their way of controlling the relationship. When they needed distance, they withdrew. When they felt overwhelmed, they disappeared. When they were scared of closeness, they built walls and hid behind them. And in the past, you tolerated it. You tried to break through that silence with patience, with compassion, with understanding. You tried to prove that your love was strong enough to wait them out. But here's the truth: the moment you walk away, their silence no longer serves them. It becomes deafening. Why? Because silence only works as long as there is someone still listening on the other side. Their withdrawal only feels powerful as long as you're chasing after them, filling the gap, sending the text, knocking on the wall they built. But when you walk away, when you stop answering, when you refuse to be the one holding the connection together, the silence that once felt safe to them suddenly becomes a prison. They're trapped in their own isolation, and for the first time, they feel the weight of emptiness they created. And this is the collapse. This is the unraveling of the control they thought they had. You see, avoidants thrive on a sense of emotional distance because it convinces them they're safe from rejection. But what they never expect is that their fear of closeness will eventually cost them the very thing they secretly wanted most: someone who truly saw them, loved them, and chose them. When you're no longer there, when your voice is gone, when your presence is missing, the avoidant is forced to confront the truth they've been running from. Their world without you is empty, and their silence has betrayed them. Now, let's get real. This doesn't happen overnight. At first, they may even pretend they're fine. They might tell themselves, good, now I don't have to deal with that pressure anymore. They might distract themselves with work, hobbies, or even someone else. But deep down, something starts to shift. The distractions don't hit the same. The temporary highs don't fill the void. The connections they try to create with others lack the depth you brought into their life. And slowly, piece by piece, their silence becomes unbearable. Because you have to remember this: avoidants don't fear love because they don't want it. They fear love because they want it too much. They fear the pain of losing it. They fear the vulnerability it requires. So they create distance as a way of protecting themselves. But when you walk away, you're no longer the threat. You're no longer the too close, too risky presence. You become the absence. And that absence is far scarier than the intimacy they once resisted. And here's where the tables turn. Your power lies in what you no longer give. You no longer feed their silence with your reassurance. You no longer soften their withdrawal with your patience. You no longer rescue them from the consequences of their distance. You leave them with exactly what they've created. And when they finally sit in that silence alone, without your voice, without your warmth, without your effort, they begin to realize what they've lost. That's why walking away is the single most powerful move you can make. Because it forces the avoidant to feel what they've been trying to avoid all along. It forces them to face themselves. It forces them to understand that silence is not safety. Silence is emptiness. And without you, their silence no longer feels like protection. It feels like punishment. And maybe, just maybe, in that silence, they'll hear something they've never heard before: the echo of their own choices, the echo of your absence, the echo of the love they pushed away. The second powerful truth is this: when you walk away, the avoidant no longer has the safety net they secretly depended on. For so long, they believed that you would always be there. They believed that no matter how much they pushed you away, no matter how many times they disappeared, no matter how inconsistent they became, you would remain. You were their constant. You were their anchor. You were the one person who absorbed the storms of their fear and still stayed. But here's the paradox. Avoidants often convince themselves they don't need anyone, yet they rely on your stability more than they realize. They may act indifferent. They may shrug off your devotion. They may tell themselves that they're fine alone. But deep inside, your presence gave them something they desperately needed: safety. And when you walk away, that safety net is gone. This is where collapse happens at the deepest level. They no longer have the comfort of knowing you'll reach out first. They no longer have the reassurance that if they withdraw, you'll still be waiting. The system they built, the push-pull dance, the hot and cold cycle, the silent treatment followed by your forgiveness, suddenly shatters. They're left with the consequences of their actions. And this is important. Walking away doesn't just show them what life is like without you. It forces them to recognize how much they were leaning on you while pretending they weren't. It exposes the truth that their independence was never as strong as they made it seem. Because the moment you step back, their false sense of control crumbles, and they're forced to face the emptiness of a world where you're no longer holding space for them. Think about it. Every human being longs for connection. Even the most avoidant, even the most detached. The difference is avoidants try to protect themselves from the pain of that longing by pretending they don't need it. But the longing is still there. And your love, your presence, your consistency gave them something their soul craved. Proof that someone could see them and not run away. Proof that someone could love them even when they were difficult to love. When you leave, they're stripped of that proof. They're left with silence. And more than that, they're left with themselves. And that's the hardest part for the avoidant, the confrontation with their own emptiness. Because when you were there, they could project their fears onto you. They could blame closeness, blame the relationship, blame the pressure of intimacy. But when you walk away, there's nothing left to project onto. There's only the raw truth staring back at them. They pushed away the very thing they wanted most. That realization shakes them to their core, because for the first time, they're forced to confront the consequences of their pattern. They can no longer escape the truth. They can no longer hide behind their walls. They can no longer pretend that pushing people away doesn't hurt them. And here's what you need to know. This collapse isn't just painful for them. It's transformational for you. Because walking away is not about punishing them. It's about freeing yourself. It's about reclaiming your worth. It's about no longer being the safety net for someone who refuses to stand on their own. And in doing so, you force the avoidant to face a decision they've avoided their entire life. Will they finally confront their fears and grow, or will they keep running into emptiness? The third truth is this: when you walk away, you break the cycle they've been unconsciously repeating their entire life. You see, avoidants are trapped in a cycle of fear. Fear of intimacy, fear of loss, fear of being vulnerable, and this fear pushes them into a pattern of pulling back whenever things get too close. It's not about you, it's about the old wounds they carry, the scars of childhood, the memories of abandonment or suffocation that shaped how they connect today. And for so long, you were caught in that cycle with them. They'd pull away, you'd chase. They'd go silent, you'd talk louder. They'd run, and you'd run after them. That cycle gave them the illusion of control. It let them believe they could stay safe while still having you close enough to not feel abandoned. But here's the key. When you walk away, you end that cycle. The chase is over. The dance is broken. The loop they've been repeating for years, maybe their whole life, is interrupted. And that interruption is powerful because it forces them to wake up. It forces them to realize that their behavior has consequences. It forces them to see that love cannot survive in a constant cycle of retreat and pursuit. Now, don't underestimate how big this is. For someone who has lived their life avoiding pain by creating distance, breaking the cycle feels like an earthquake. Suddenly, the rules they've lived by no longer apply. Suddenly, the script they've always used no longer works. Suddenly, the partner who always chased is no longer there, and that absence creates a shockwave they can't ignore. And here's where your strength changes everything. By refusing to play the game, you teach them the one lesson they never wanted to learn. Love requires reciprocity. Love requires presence. Love requires courage. Without it, love dies. And that's exactly what happens when you walk away. Their cycle dies with it. But the beauty of this moment is that it doesn't just end their cycle. It frees you from yours too. Because let's be real, you've been caught in your own cycle as well. The cycle of trying to prove your worth. The cycle of fixing. The cycle of hoping they'll change if you love them hard enough. By walking away, you break your cycle too. You declare that you will no longer be trapped in a love that drains you. You claim your freedom. And here's what's fascinating: sometimes that's the only thing powerful enough to wake an avoidant up. Not your words, not your patience, not your devotion, but your absence. The collapse of the cycle forces them to finally see themselves clearly. And in that mirror, they either break open and grow, or they stay stuck. Either way, you've already won, because you've broken free. The fourth truth is this: when you walk away, the avoidant feels the weight of what they lost in ways they never imagined. At first, they may try to convince themselves that nothing has changed. They may throw themselves into distractions, work, friends, hobbies, even fleeting connections, to numb the space you once filled. But here's the reality: no distraction can replace depth. No temporary fix can replace the consistency, warmth, and love you provided. And sooner or later, the void becomes undeniable. You see, avoidants often operate under the illusion that connection is replaceable. They tell themselves that if one relationship ends, another can take its place. But when someone like you comes into their life, someone who brings stability, love, and patience, they experience a level of connection that's rare. And once you're gone, they realize just how unique it was. Think about it: you were the one who tried to understand them when others gave up. You were the one who stayed when their walls went up. You were the one who saw beyond their defenses into the heart they tried so hard to hide. That kind of love isn't common. And when you leave, the reality hits them hard. They didn't just lose a partner. They lost the one person who was willing to fight for them, even when they didn't know how to fight for themselves. And here's what makes this so powerful. Avoidants often believe they're protecting themselves from pain by avoiding closeness. But what they don't realize is that the very act of avoiding creates the deepest pain of all: regret. Because when you're no longer there, they're not just left with loneliness. They're left with the memory of what could have been. They're left replaying the moments they pushed you away, the times they stayed silent instead of speaking, the times they turned their back instead of reaching out. And that regret becomes heavier than any closeness ever could have been. This collapse is not loud, it's quiet. It doesn't always show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it looks like them lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the one text they didn't send changed everything. Sometimes it looks like them scrolling through old messages, replaying your voice, reliving the moments they took for granted. Sometimes it looks like a deep emptiness they can't explain to anyone else because no one else understands the space you once occupied. And that's the irony. The avoidant who once felt suffocated by love now feels suffocated by the absence of it. The space they created to protect themselves has now become unbearable. And the collapse is complete. They realize that in their attempt to avoid pain, they created the very pain they feared most. But let's turn the spotlight back on you for a moment, because this truth is not just about their loss, it's about your gain. When you walk away, you gain clarity, you gain strength, you gain the ability to see that your love is rare, your patience is valuable, and your presence is a gift. And that gift is not meant to be wasted on someone who cannot appreciate it. Their loss becomes your liberation. Their regret becomes your freedom. Their collapse becomes your rise. The fifth truth is this: when you walk away, the avoidant is forced to confront their deepest fear, abandonment. Now, this may sound strange because avoidants are the ones who seem to do the abandoning. They're the ones who leave first, who pull away, who withdraw. But beneath all of that behavior lies the core fear of being left behind. That's why they run. That's why they distance themselves. They believe that if they leave first, they won't have to feel the devastation of being abandoned. But when you walk away, you flip the script. You become the one who leaves. You become the one who chooses yourself over their inconsistency. You become the one who refuses to stay trapped in a cycle of pain. And suddenly, their greatest fear becomes reality, not because you wanted to hurt them, but because you finally honored yourself. This is where the collapse cuts deepest. Because for the avoidant, being abandoned confirms the wound they've carried their entire life. It validates the pain they've been running from. It shows them that distance doesn't prevent loss. It causes it. That walls don't protect love. They destroy it. That running doesn't keep them safe. It keeps them alone. And this is not about revenge. This is not about making them suffer. This is about truth, because the truth is they were never abandoned by you. You gave them chance after chance. You showed up when it was hard. You loved them when it wasn't easy. You tried in ways few people ever would. Walking away wasn't betrayal, it was the final act of self-respect. But for them, it feels like abandonment because they never expected you to actually leave. And here's where the power lies in that collapse. Some avoidants wake up. For the first time, they see that their behavior isn't protecting them. It's destroying the very thing they want. For the first time, they're forced to choose. Will they keep running from closeness, or will they finally face their fear and fight for something real? And even if they never choose growth, you've already won, because you're no longer trapped in their cycle. You're no longer held hostage by their fear. You're free. And in that freedom, you discover the truth. You were never the one who abandoned them. They abandoned themselves long before you walked away. The sixth and final truth is this: when you walk away, you reclaim your power, and the avoidant feels the shift immediately. For so long, they've relied on your pursuit to validate their control. Every time you chased, it reassured them that they were wanted. Every time you forgave, it reassured them that they were safe to withdraw again. Every time you stayed, it reassured them that no matter what they did, you wouldn't leave. But the moment you walk away, all of that changes. Suddenly, the power dynamic is flipped. Suddenly, the one who always gave is no longer giving. Suddenly, the one who always stayed is gone. And in that shift, the avoidant realizes something life-altering. They were never in control. Because true control doesn't come from pushing people away. True control doesn't come from silence, withdrawal, or fear. True control comes from self-awareness, vulnerability, and love. And when you walk away, you take back the energy they were unconsciously feeding on. You declare with your actions, I am not defined by your walls. I am not bound by your fear. I am not controlled by your distance. I am free. That freedom is magnetic. That freedom is powerful. That freedom is what transforms you. Because the truth is, you never needed them to validate your worth. You never needed their closeness to define your value. Your worth has always been yours. It was never theirs to give or take. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stand in that power, that's often the moment the avoidant begins to see you clearly. Because they're no longer blinded by the comfort of your pursuit. They're no longer cushioned by the safety of your devotion. They're forced to see you as you truly are, a person of strength, dignity, and unshakable self-respect. And whether they come back or not doesn't matter, because the collapse of their world marks the expansion of yours. Their loss is your liberation. Their silence is your peace. Their walls are no longer your cage. You are free, you are powerful, and you are enough. When you walk away from an avoidant, you are not just leaving a relationship, you are stepping into your power. For too long, you may have confused patience with sacrifice, love with suffering, loyalty with self-abandonment. But the moment you choose yourself, the moment you reclaim your dignity, the moment you refuse to pour into someone who refuses to pour back, you ignite a transformation. Yes, it collapses their world. Yes, it shakes their foundation. But more importantly, it expands yours. You finally remember who you are, and that realization is the greatest liberation of all. The collapse they feel is not just about losing you, it's about losing the illusion of control they've held onto their entire life. They thought they could keep you on the hook with silence, withdrawal, and distance. But when you walked away, you shattered that illusion. And in its place, they are forced to confront the truth. Love requires courage, presence, and reciprocity. For them, that realization is painful. But for you, it's powerful, because you've proven to yourself that your worth does not depend on someone else's ability to see it. Walking away is not weakness. It is strength. It is not rejection. It is redirection. It is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a new chapter, one where your heart is no longer chained to someone else's fear. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it may break you open. But in that breaking, something stronger emerges. The version of you who knows their value, the version of you who refuses to settle, the version of you who demands a love that matches the depth of what you give. And maybe, just maybe, in the silence you leave behind, the avoidant begins to wake up. Maybe they see you clearly for the first time. Maybe they realize what they pushed away. Maybe they even try to return. But whether they do or not is no longer the point. Because this was never about changing them. It was about freeing you. Their collapse is their responsibility. Your healing is yours. And when you choose yourself, you always win, no matter what they choose. So let this be your reminder. You are not the one who lost when you walked away. They are. You gained clarity, strength, and freedom. You gained the ability to open your life to relationships built on mutual respect, honesty, and love. You gained the power to write a new story for yourself, one where you no longer shrink to fit someone else's fear. Their world may collapse, but yours expands. And in that expansion, you rise into everything you were always meant to be. Thank you for giving me your time, your energy, and your attention today. I know these words may have stirred something inside you, memories, emotions, maybe even pain. But if you take nothing else from this message, let it be this. You are stronger than you realize, and your value has never depended on anyone else's ability to see it. Walking away is not about proving a point. It's about protecting your soul. It's about standing tall in your worth. And I want you to remember, every single time you choose yourself, you are not losing. You are winning. You are building a life where you no longer settle for half love, where you no longer fight for someone else's attention, where you no longer confuse distance for intimacy. You are building a life of truth, power, and freedom. So as you leave here today, carry this with you. You are not the one who collapses when you walk away. They are. Your world doesn't shrink, it expands. Your light doesn't dim, it shines brighter. And your journey doesn't end, it begins again on your terms, in your strength, and with a love that truly matches who you are. Thank you for walking this path with me. Thank you for choosing to listen, to grow, and to rise. Until next time, remember this: you are worthy, you are powerful, and the best chapters of your life are still ahead of you. Goodbye for now. Go and live in your power.